Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk about how to pass your NCLEX in 75 questions, exactly how I studied for it, step by step, and how I used UWORLD to pass. So first of all, my study experience consisted of 8 weeks. I gave myself 8 weeks to study. However, I think it's acceptable to give yourself anywhere between 4 to 10 weeks. I think pushing 3 months is a little bit hard because you tend to forget the stuff that you learn in the beginning, which is why I gave myself about 2 months to actually study for the NCLEX and be adequately prepared. In terms of how many hours a day I was studying anywhere between 4 to 5 hours a day. Now, I know people that would study for like 12 hours a day, which for me, for my mental health, I cannot do it. So I study much better in the morning as soon as I wake up because I'm just way more awake and more alert. So I like to study around 9-10 o'clock and I would finish around 3 o'clock just because I think it's really important to take breaks, and I always had something to look forward to at the end of the day, so it kind of motivated me to keep on studying. So now let's talk about my study tools. Really and truly, the thing that helped me pass the NCLEX was UWORLD. It wasn't really Hearst, it wasn't really the Saunders review book. However, in the beginning, I did go through this book, which is the Saunders Comprehensive Review NCLEX RN Examination book. Now, this has a lot of information. This is the 7th edition. I believe they have an 8th edition as well. I did use this, and honestly, you guys, I really truly think it was UWORLD that helped me pass, and I'm going to talk about why and how to use it properly so that you can pass in a second. But this book is really good in terms of laying your knowledge, laying in the foundations for certain systems or anatomy. If you're unfamiliar with it, it is a good reference tool and a good review book. So for example, I really struggled with heart rhythms. So, and also in UWORLD, I know I was getting a lot of those questions wrong because I just didn't really remember them or understand them. So a lot of the times I would go back to this book as a reference tool to kind of study that stuff that I was unfamiliar with or getting a lot of questions wrong on. And that's what I would encourage you to do, is if you know you're doing UWORLD, you're doing questions and you're getting a certain type of question wrong that maybe relates to heart rhythms, for example, was my case. So I would go back into this book and then review heart rhythms. In the beginning, I did go through this whole book and I did make a lot of notes, but honestly, you guys, going through this whole book, you tend to forget it because it's just tons and tons of information that honestly the NCLEX is not going to test you on the tiniest of details. But I did go in here, I did take notes, and I put like a little post-it note on these sections that I would go over, just highlighting the key areas. However, again, I don't think this truly helped me pass my NCLEX, but it was a great reference tool for things that you really keep getting wrong or you really don't understand. It's good to kind of increase your knowledge on it and build your foundations. But UWORLD is by far the best tool that you're going to use to pass your NCLEX in a very low amount of questions. And the reason why I truly believe UWORLD is good is because those questions are very similar to actual NCLEX questions. Not only that, but the format and the style that UWORLD uses is almost identical to the actual NCLEX. And I think when you're studying for 8 weeks or so, just using UWORLD and just getting questions after questions after questions, you know, you start to familiarize yourself with those types of questions. So it's much more easy to apply it, and you're very much used to that kind of an experience when you're actually writing your NCLEX because you've been doing it for so many weeks. So the UWORLD package that I chose was the 3-month or 90-day package. So that does come with, I think, over 2,000 questions, practice questions, as well as 2 practice tests. And I think this was, for me, awesome. How to use UWORLD. So the way to effectively use UWORLD, and this is the way that I studied, is I would do anywhere between 50 to 100 questions every single day, and I would read the rationale and make notes on this rationale and review the rationale as well. The reason why this is so important is because when you're doing these questions, a lot of people will get the question right and then move on. But the trick is to actually read the question very carefully and look at all the options, because UWorld will tell you why the question or why the option that you chose is correct, as well as why the other options are incorrect. And that is really important, because when you're learning that, you're also learning about other types of diseases or other types of signs and symptoms that maybe relate to another topic, and that can come up in another question. You always want to make sure you're answering questions and you're understanding why they are right and why the other ones are wrong. And always make sure you read questions carefully, because a lot of the times they will ask you which of the following is correct or which of the following is incorrect. And a lot of people, confuse incorrect and correct because you're just reading the question so fast and you just click the answer that is the most relevant to the question. Definitely want to read the question, read all of the options, and really understand why the other options are incorrect. So some of these rationales can be very long. So you want to make sure you're just highlighting or writing down key points. That's what I did. And then at the end of my study session, I would just kind of quickly review those key points. And really doing these questions is what's going to help you. The number one thing I want to also mention is that do not be discouraged by UWorld scores. I was scoring honestly like 50 and 60%. Really, it doesn't matter, because you're using UWorld as a learning tool. You're using it as a studying tool. So even if you're getting questions wrong, as long as you're understanding, reading the rationale, taking notes on the rationale, and understanding why the options are incorrect or correct, that is the key idea. You will also notice that as you get closer to your NCLEX date and after many weeks of studying, your scores will start to improve. And the reason why is because you're getting better, because you're doing more and more questions. Now, when it comes to the 2 practice tests, do not do these practice tests the day before your NCLEX. The reason why is because you want to give yourself time to review areas that you're not that familiar with or you're not really getting. So I did the first practice test about 2 weeks before my actual NCLEX date, or 2.5 weeks before my NCLEX date, and I did get very high chance of passing, and I do think it's a very good indicator for how you're going to do on your actual NCLEX test. But I did see some areas that I'm like, oh, okay, I don't really know maternity, or I really don't know leadership, or whatever it is. So it gave me a chance to go back and review those units that I was not familiar with. And then I did my second test about a week before my actual NCLEX date, which I did get very high chance of passing. And so I was like, okay, I feel much more prepared now for the actual NCLEX. One thing that I do want to mention with using UWorld, a lot of people focus on just anatomy and physiology and pathology and the diseases, but the NCLEX is not just that kind of stuff. It also includes things like leadership questions, management questions, your nursing roles, whether you're an RN, RPN, LPN, NP. So you do need to know the scope. A lot of people ignore those types of questions, but they actually do make up a big chunk of your actual NCLEX. So do not ignore those questions on UWorld. I did complete all of the UWorld questions, and I did go back and review some of those questions as well when I was studying for the actual NCLEX. When I started studying for the NCLEX using UWorld, I would originally go system by system. And the reason I did that in the beginning was just because I wanted to really understand those units, or understand, for example, I started doing cardiology, and then I finished cardiology, then I moved to respiratory, and then I did respiratory questions. But when I was getting closer to the NCLEX date, I started mixing up the questions. I just did it in the beginning because I wanted to fully understand each system before kind of scrambling them all together. But you do have to realize that your NCLEX will be a mix of different types of questions. But in the beginning, I would say the first 3-4 weeks, I was just doing purely unit by unit until I finished all of the units. Then I started mixing units together so that I would get a variety and kind of create my own practice tests. And you can select how many questions you want and what units you want, which is really awesome. And that's what's great and customizable about UWorld, because you can really focus on areas that you may not be sure of, you may not be familiar with, that you might be struggling with. You can do more and more of those questions. So in terms of pharmacology, the only pharmacology or the only medications that I studied were purely from UWORLD. I did not get a medication book. I did not use any other tools for medications. I just purely did UWORLD questions. The one thing that I think you do have to memorize apart from UWORLD is lab values. You definitely want to know your lab values and the ranges for each. So for example, potassium 3.5 to 5. You want to make sure you know the ranges that are acceptable for each of those lab values. In terms of the day before the NCLEX, I really didn't do anything except for going over that lab value sheet because I didn't want to lose marks just because I forgot, the range of a lab value like sodium or potassium. I wanted to make sure I knew those really, really well. So that's the only thing that I quickly reviewed before the day before my actual NCLEX. I just spent the whole day relaxing. I did not sleep. Honestly, I did not sleep the day before, but really tried to get a good night's sleep and relax. In the end, you know whatever you know. So the day before, I would never cram. I would not be, studying last minute things. Just kind of have a chill day and relax so that you're good for the next day. So on the actual NCLEX day, I was really, really nervous. Honestly, I was. But you have to realize that everyone is nervous and everyone's freaking out. People, when I got there, I could see people sweating. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster. And I started freaking myself out. But at the end of the day, everybody's nervous. And also realize that you can write your NCLEX again. So it's not the end of the world if you fail. And honestly, I know people that have failed and rewrote it and passed with flying colors because you learn from that experience. So always remember that everyone else is nervous. You are allowed to take breaks. So if you're writing NCLEX, you feel like you're getting a panic attack, just ask if you can excuse yourself and take a break. Yes, the time will keep running, but at the end of the day, these breaks can really make a big difference. So I would honestly, if you were really, really stressed out and you were panicking a little bit, just ask if you can excuse yourself for a minute and come back more refreshed. Don't forget to bring your ID to your NCLEX. Everything else was provided to me. I really like the testing environment. They did give me noise canceling headphones, so that was really great. When you are doing these actual questions, it's just really important to take your time and read the questions very carefully and getting things mixed up. Like for example, if it says which of the following are incorrect or which of the following doesn't apply, it's so easy to read those kinds of questions wrong. So make sure you carefully read each question and carefully read every single option. You can use process of elimination if you are unsure of it. And that's what I did as well. There were many questions that I just didn't know, and I think the best advice I would give someone is just go with your gut for questions that you just don't know. Again, try process of elimination. Do not spend more than 1 to 2 minutes on a question because the time will keep going, and I think it's good to think about the questions, but ultimately there's some questions that you just don't know, and you don't want to spend like 10 minutes on one question. That would be far too long. So I would say on average I was probably spending about a minute a question. So when I did UWorld, again, I was doing between 50 to 100 questions every single day. I would make notes on the rationales and then I would review those rationales. And that's really important because you don't want to forget the things that you've learned. And I think doing around 50 to 100 questions a day is really good because you don't want to overload your brain with a lot of information as well. And again, anything that you're kind of unsure of, maybe UWorld didn't explain it that well, that is when you want to go to your Saunders review book. But ultimately, I really do think it was UWorld that helped me pass. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope I answered all of your questions. If you have any questions, make sure you comment them down below. I'd be happy to answer them. And thanks so much for watching, guys. Good luck. Bye.